Welcome to the Awakened Anesthetist podcast, the first podcast to highlight the CAA experience. I'm your host, Mary Jean, and I've been a Certified Anesthesiologist Assistant for close to 2 decades. Throughout my journey and struggles, I've searched for guidance that includes my unique perspective as a CAA. At one of my lowest points, I decided to turn my passion for storytelling and my belief that the CAA profession is uniquely able to create a life by design into a podcast. If you are a practicing CAA, current AA student, or someone who hopes to be one, I encourage you to stick around and experience the power of being in a community filled with voices who sound like yours, sharing experiences you never believed possible. I know you will find yourself here at the Awakened Anesthetist podcast. Welcome in. Hello, Awakened Anesthetist community. This is Mary Jean, your host. I am a 18-year now practicing Certified Anesthesiologist Assistant. I am a longtime AA educator, really focused on emotional intelligence as the art of anesthesia. And the episode you're about to hear is with one of my mentors. She is a neonatologist, a physician here in the Kansas City area where I live. Our paths have crossed and almost crossed several times as we're both very invested in bringing mindfulness to our physician and CAA communities. We both graduated from the Mindful Practice in Medicine course training, which I talk about a little bit in the beginning, and Dr. Jackson kind of puts a little bit of finer point on what that is. But that's definitely where our paths initially crossed. And then because she's local and she graduated from this program that I graduated from, I reached out, as I am always looking for expanders and mentors to really bounce ideas off of and just open my eyes and heart to new ideas and things that I'm passionate about. I'm always looking for people to kind of help elevate me and what I believe is possible, hence this podcast for all of you. But our interview today is really talking about not so much that part, but the Enneagram. Dr. Jackson is a certified Enneagram teacher. And in our last meeting, she just mentioned that she has that certification. And I was like, oh, I want to have you share that on the podcast. So this is our conversation about the Enneagram. If you are completely new to the Enneagram, you can choose. I will, in the show notes, have a free Enneagram test, which Dr. Jackson talks more about how to utilize that resource. But if you want to take it and then listen to this episode, you can, or you can listen to this episode and then take it at the end when you've sort of absorbed more of the perspective from Dr. Jackson on what that test, what that information is going to mean for you and to you. So you have free reign there. You can go to the show notes, take that free assessment to receive your Enneagram number. If you've heard anyone talk about, oh, I'm an Enneagram 3 or 8 or 9, that's what they're talking about, and you'll get your number. And then listen to this episode or re-listen to this episode. This episode's also going to be on YouTube, and I'm just really excited to bring these conversations from my mentors to all of you. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Dr. Jodi Jackson. This Wellness Wednesday is brought to you by CAA Matters, the first comprehensive wellness and professionalism curriculum designed to truly support the AA student experience. We all know AA education is streamlined to produce competent providers in a fast-paced program. Meanwhile, wellness and professionalism often get overlooked, lumped in with medical students, or addressed too late to help. CAA Matters fills this gap, centering student anesthesiologist assistants and equipping them with the tools, resources, and mindset shifts to succeed in school and build long, fulfilling careers. It's a turnkey curriculum, fully prepared, facilitated, and supported from planning to delivery. Program leaders and AA educators can learn more, read reviews from early adopters, and explore piloting CAA Matters at awakenedanesthetist.com or by clicking the link in the show notes. Today I am joined by Dr. Jodi Jackson, who I actually know from one area of my life, but we're here to talk about kind of a whole new area that she just told me she was interested in. I was like, ooh, that's what I want to talk to you about on the podcast. So Dr. Jackson and I both graduated from the Mindful Practice in Medicine training. Dr. Jackson has done the advanced facilitator training, and I stopped just at the facilitator training. And in that program, I had said, hey, is there anyone in my area that has also gone through this program? And I was given your name. And so that is how I first emailed you and reached out and just wanted to chat about the experience in mindful practice in medicine, which we're not here to talk a lot about, but it's a program that is very important to you and your work and something that I was kind of dabbling in. And so that's where our paths crossed. You are a neonatologist among several other titles here in the Kansas City area. We also kind of ran parallel lives through the UMKC, the University of Missouri Kansas City School of Medicine, where the AA program here is housed in Kansas City. And then you worked in the MD program there in the wellness arena. So we have many things that have brought us close together, but in our one time that we've met in person, I went to your work. We had some coffee and met and had a conversation, and you told me that you were really into the Enneagram and actually were attending a conference. And so that is what we're here to talk about today. And I'm so excited to bring your voice because the Enneagram can get a little bit kind of, I think, a bad rap. And so I'm really excited to bring it from your perspective, really the science-minded, grounded perspective. So after that long intro, hopefully everyone feels like they know why you and I are here together. I'm just really excited to have you on the Awaken Anesthetist podcast. Is there anything I missed, Dr. Jackson, on?
Thanks for the intro. Yeah, we had a very lovely meeting that could have probably gone on for all day, but I think we both had to do something else.
Yes.
But let's recognize our mentors we have in common, Mick Krasner and Ron Epstein, who have started the Mindful Practice in Medicine program in the late 90s, published in JAMA about this wonderful program, that first literature-based program showing that this teaching can help healthcare providers flourish and be more resilient and make less errors and really mitigate burnout. And that's the training, that's our mentors in common. And that's what I'm teaching at the medical school. And so I'd like to recognize that's a huge part of why we know each other and what we have in common. And yeah, and I've been training in Enneagram kind of alongside of that. So I started that training in 2011, and I started training in Enneagram about 2017. So
okay,
not as long, but the teachings and the wisdom of those two bodies overlap so profoundly that I can't find myself teaching or even talking about one without bringing in the other. And at this point, I don't even know sometimes which is which, because they're both just part of my language and how I see the world and how I approach wellness and flourishing in medicine and also just in life.
Mm-hmm.
So I did want to share that. Like, there's so much overlap. There's not like, oh, I'm an Enneagram teacher and I'm a mindfulness teacher. I'm like a teacher of consciousness. And those are the two things and a physician of 35 years. And so that also informs how I show up. Healthcare provider for all these years, neonatologist, as you said, but a huge amount of what I do is support families. So, yeah, I'm a critical care doctor and I do things to little babies who need help and help them live. But I'd say at least half or more of what I do is support families through what can be the worst things that ever happened in their life. And so I think being in that space has been a big part of why I've been exploring these ways of supporting human beings in general. Yeah, I didn't anticipate saying any of that, but that's how it all comes together.
I love it. I love it. That's why I love podcasting. I love kind of asking something and then like whatever comes out ends up coming out. Tell me a little bit about how you came into the Enneagram in 2017. I was trying to remember how I first heard about the Enneagram, and I know it was on a podcast, but I can't remember why, what, or who. So tell me how that entered your world, because this very likely will be the first time people hear about the Enneagram in my audience. So
yeah, well, interesting. A lot of people lately have heard of it, and I'm glad you're interviewing me about it, because what they're hearing really isn't, I think, the full opportunity of what the Enneagram has to offer. So I'm glad that you're asking. But I've noticed really actually, even the last 4 years that I've been teaching mindfulness, I periodically be like, have you heard of the Enneagram to some of my students? And now almost everybody has, and they're fascinated by it. So a lot of people have heard of it and are interested in it. I actually just accidentally picked up a book probably before I started formally being taught, maybe 2015 or 16, read the book, thought it was really fascinating, didn't do much with it. And then I happened upon a group at the Unity Temple on the Plaza, which is a local kind of inviting place for spiritual growth. And the minister there was teaching it. And I got into a community of people learning it and kind of saw the value and started getting more educated, and then joined groups and online groups and then formal education. And it just seemed to, as I kind of just said before, fill in the gaps of some of the knowledge I'd cultivated through the mindfulness work.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things about the mindfulness work, teaching the mindfulness work, is basically learning to put a space between stimulus and response. So I have this figure I show, it's a little stick man, and there's stimulus and response in the spaces where we have our power, where we can choose. We can't affect what comes to us, things come to us, but we can affect what we do with that, and then how we respond. And the mindfulness work is about kind of that space. And noticing is a huge part of the mindfulness. So what the Enneagram does is gives us kind of a map of how to notice. And so that's the biggest part of the mindfulness work that I'd already been studying and doing by that point, by 8 or 9 years. But the Enneagram really gives us that map of what are we looking at? What are we noticing? And what we're noticing is this kind of mantra of how we show up that may be not voluntary, that may be what we call in the Enneagram language our fixation, where we're stuck. And those are all Enneagram words, fixation, stuck. Sometimes the Enneagram is taught in a very spiritual sense, and people call it our vice, our virtues and our vices. But it can also be taught completely secularly, where we just talk about where we're stuck, like how we show up. And so it just floats so beautifully, because it's like, yes, a space. What do we do in that space? We notice. Enneagram's all about noticing and how to notice, and the inner observer and the inner critic. Mm-hmm. And so when we start to have this map of, like I've identified my type, and my type shows up like this, and I'm showing up like this every time. Is that really me, or is that a place I'm stuck? And so that's what the Enneagram does for us. It's teaching our personality types, which isn't the greatest words to use to define the points, because it's not really who we are. It's where we're stuck. But when we start to see, well, there's typical ways of doing, there's 9 stereotypical ways of doing that. And I fit in one of those. And so this way of showing up and surviving that I thought was like paramount to me really is a fixation that other people share. And maybe it's not the only way to show up. And I mean, that's one of the greatest gifts, I think, of the Enneagram, is that idea even that there's other ways to show up or experience. And like I said in the beginning, noticing, like, oh my God, I'm doing that again. And I understand better how people perceive it. So that's kind of how the Enneagram came into it. And that's why it stuck so much. And that's why it continues to stick.
Yeah, you actually unlock something for me as you were talking about the noticing piece, because I've been thinking, like, why am I drawn to the Enneagram? What is it about it? And that piece that it allows you to notice better. And, of course, we have a mutual interest in mindfulness, and mindfulness it means a lot of things, kind of, especially when it's in the zeitgeist. And there's like a slowing down piece in order to notice, which can be part of the mindfulness process. And then it's like, okay, the Enneagram helps us notice. Then you have the space between stimulus and response. And I just had a guest on, another pediatric ER physician, actually, who was talking about neuroplasticity and how in that space she wants her students to choose compassion. So she was really talking about what to do in that space, and that offering was self-compassion. And then, of course, the response, how to respond and how to act compassionately was her kind of focus. So it's just, I can see how it all flows together, just exactly like you said, how one leads into the next and offers more like a window into clarity, which I think as science-minded people, research-based, evidence-based, we want more clarity. And that's exactly, you're right, why the Enneagram is so fascinating. And dare I say, to people like us, and lots of other people as well. But I'm interested now. Maybe my audience is really familiar with the Enneagram. I found out about it just a few years ago. So I'm suspecting this will be kind of an eye-opening conversation. And I wanted to go back just briefly because when you said inner critic, I could hear my audience's ears perk up. Talk a little bit about how the Enneagram helps us maybe notice or name our inner critic. Like, what's the link there?
Thanks. And different types have a louder, more difficult inner critic. Every type has an inner critic. Certain types' inner critic is super busy. And then some types, they call it the inner committee. So it's all the different, like you did this, like it's from all different viewpoints. But all types have that. And it's really interesting how, as humans, we oscillate between kind of trying to support ourselves and also criticize ourselves. And a lot of the times, the way that we show up is actually a defense against the critic. And we don't always know it. Like, we feel really strongly about something and come forward and don't realize we're actually combating this inner critic who's somehow thinks maybe we're not good enough. Maybe we're an imposter. Maybe we don't really know. Maybe we aren't really deserving. And how do we deal with that? And all the types of different ways to deal with that. Some lean into it and some hide from it. Some try to please to quiet the critic. Some self-correct to the point of being paralyzed. And so it can show up so differently. And part of the gift of knowing one's type is like recognizing that and then saying, oh, like when I do that, that's my inner critic. And it's not always obvious. Some types turn off. And so it's different. All the types are different. And I'm glad you brought up also like people like us who are science minded. One of the other things I find so intriguing or kind of validating, I guess, about Enneagram. So there's all different takes of it. Like I said, there's spiritual takes, and it aligns with all sorts of spiritual teachings and mathematical teachings because it's all these triangles and they line up. And people who are into pure math talk about how it's aligned with Pythagoras theory, and it was. But there's literature from the 70s about temperament that was completely separate from Enneagram teaching or knowing or knowledge. And there's a publication talking about 9 temperaments in babies, and they really align with the 9 Enneagram types. So one of the things that I find validating is this kind of idea of temperaments was there separate from this idea of the Enneagram. And when the Enneagram kind of found its way in the 60s and 70s in Berkeley and kind of that milieu of being open to those things, and then medicine and psychologists and psychiatrists started to see, oh, it does align also with some of the things we're teaching. So depending on a person's interest and entry point, it could really mean very different things to different people. It's not meant to be a tool for productivity. It's not meant to help us do better in the workplace or to get along with people better necessarily. The initial purpose is kind of a growth tool to see where we're stuck.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about pigeonholing people. In fact, one of my teachers, my main teacher is Russ Hudson, who's kind of considered the biggest name right now. He is the big textbook that he teaches on, and I've been learning kind of at his side for a number of years. He says it's not about putting ourselves in a box. It's about seeing the box that we're stuck in and how to release it. Now, we never change our type. We're never not going to be our type or be kind of that's our home base. And that's good. I mean, the world needs all 9 people, and all 9 ways of showing up have beautiful gifts that are essential for the human experience. And so it's wonderful that we have these gifts and we bring them forward of our type. And really what I would encourage people who are interested to do is to do the discovery. Like, we can take tests, and I gave you a free test, a link to it's 2 free tests in one. And what I like about free tests is we're not too invested in them because they're free.
Yes.
And so we're not like, oh, I paid money for this, it must be right. And what the tests do is it'll give you the likelihood of all you are, and to hold that extremely loosely. So it's not a diagnosis. It's it's an entry point. And to maybe start looking at the top three. I also gave you two really nice websites, the two areas that I'm certified to teach through the Institute and through Narrative, which are different, really different teaching, but they have really nice resources. And so I encourage, and also the little free test has free resources. So what I encourage people to do is start reading about the types, like see their entry point. It gives you a point to kind of be interested, a place to start reading and start reading. And it's the journey of reading and discovery that is the growth tool. Like just being said, you're a this doesn't help a person grow, because then they've been, pigeonholed. And so they may or may not agree with all the things, but if they just believe it, they're not going to grow. And so all of that is a journey, because the goal isn't to know our type. Our goal is to have space and understand how we show up differently from others, and as important, how others show up. So like when I present, often people are like, well, just get to the whatever. I'm a 5. I want to see the 5. I'm like, no, you don't, because it's not just about you. Yes. And it's not, and we don't live in isolation. So even if I clearly identify what you are and you're like, oh, that's exactly what I am, it doesn't help you to know that if you don't know how that's different from the others. And so I really discourage kind of diving in and just trying to define the types and pick where I am on that. In fact, some people spend months finding their type, like to open that space up to this might be a journey. This might take me months, weeks, months, years. Some types have no trouble. Some types it's really, really obvious. So it's all needs to be held really loosely with the goal of learning discernment and compassion. And all these tools, not to pigeonhole us, but to allow us to open and flourish.
Such an opportunity. I mean, of course, I'm thinking about this for myself, but as I, take the bird's eye view on my profession, which works in a team. Like I am part of an anesthesia care team. I will always be working with lots of personalities. I'm sure there's particular personalities that work in a NICU, and the same can be said for an OR. And there's all of that triangulation that you have to do with personalities. How can a CAA or someone who wants to become a CAA or an AA student start to learn how to use the Enneagram to understand that relationship that will happen every day in the OR?
That's a great question. And I'm not sure that any specific types gravitate toward any specific professions. People will do the exact same things for very different reasons. And so we don't necessarily say, oh, more doctors are this type, or more nurses are this type, or more anesthesiologists this type. I don't think you can say that, because, like I said before, it's the same behavior for very different reasons. And so we see usually a pretty even distribution of types just around, but you might see a behavior that's more common. And that's where it gets confusing, because you just assume every time you see that behavior, it means this. And,
yes, totally.
For example, surgeons can seem very sure of themselves and sometimes aggressive. It doesn't mean they're all the aggressive Enneagram type. It could be that's the way that they are safe from fear, or that's the way that they've had to develop in order to fill a role that they thought they needed to fill, or are really protective of their inner energy. They're the type that doesn't have a lot of energy to give, so they have to have this barrier to protect themselves. So there could be all different reasons that people show up a certain way. I think as a member of a team, what's the best thing is if everybody can learn it, we can have common language, but that's kind of maybe never going to happen. So the other thing that's helpful is to know, as a member of a team, where I'm coming from, where I'm stuck, and what my triggers are. And certain types are triggered by other types, and for very, very specific reasons. And so when I know my type and I know what triggers me, we can say to ourselves, that energy feels like a whatever. And I know that triggers me in this way. And I may be assigning motivations to somebody that don't actually exist. But the first thing I need to do is modulate my response. And so if I know when people show up this way, it triggers me in this way, then there's that stimulus and response thing. I can say, okay, they're coming forward with this kind of energy, and this makes me feel this way. And I know that because I've done the work, and I know when I see this kind of energy show up, this is what I do. And it might be I become more aggressive, or I shut down, or I people please, or I study more, or it might be any of those things. And it might be different depending on the different energy that I see. And so that's really helpful, because I know then I can notice that myself and say, okay, I know how to deal with this kind of energy because I've seen it before and I know what it does to me. So now I'm armed with the ability to not do that if I don't want to. The other thing that I can do is to start asking questions offline about why and how. I noticed when we were in this case, this is what happened, and I'm just wondering what you were thinking when you said that. And if it's an environment, hopefully it's an environment where those questions can be asked, can be that kind of curiosity, which is the mindfulness work, that beginner's mind, which we don't talk about in Enneagram. So this is another overlap, but the mindfulness work is the beginner's mind, or critical curiosity. There's a whole module about moving from furious to curious. How do we move from being angry to curious?
Mm-hmm.
So using that mindfulness language and that kind of teaching to be curious and really say, give it a name. Like, I noticed you got impatient in this situation, and I'm just wondering what was going on for you. And being able to do that in a way that's curious and not like, hey, what the hell is wrong with you? Why'd you
Exactly.
do this?
Yes.
It's not, what were you thinking? It's, I'm interested. What were you thinking? Very different, same words, very different energy. But if we can be open, truly open to knowing what they were thinking, where it came from, then we can know more about what their type is. And, when somebody's aggressive and I'm like, I'm just wondering what's going on for you. You seem really aggressive. If they're like, I was really worried because we weren't following the policy or procedure, that's, one. Or I became afraid because I didn't know what to do, or I wasn't expecting that. That's a different one. Or, I felt like people weren't respecting me enough. That's a different one. Or then we can have a better idea of least of that person's motivations and what it means when they behave in a certain way. And then develop a little bit more compassion and also be able to respond in a way that might be more helpful. Because if we really know what the impetus for that behavior was, we can give the response that's going to help it. How can I understand better what's underneath these behaviors from other people?
I'm having lots of bells go off because for whatever reason in my life, as I'm kind of diving deeper into what really draws my interest and passion, I'm really drawn to defining and teaching how to teach this thing in my world that we call the art of anesthesia. And maybe there's a link in your world as well, but it's exactly what you're talking about. Like being able to read the energy in the room, being able to modulate your own sympathetic nervous system because anesthesia sets the tone in the OR. Like the Enneagram can be a tool for a CAA to learn about themselves first and foremost. And then as you get, more understanding of yourself, you can use that knowledge to learn more about the room and that art of anesthesia, which is kind of this like ethereal thing everyone talks about. But it's like, no, I'm pretty sure I'm finding some things that you can actually do to learn the art of anesthesia. And the Enneagram feels like exactly one of these places you could go to learn.
One of the super cool learning instruments. I agree with you, absolutely. There's a lot of podcasts and interviews where people do panels of different types. And then you can listen to different types talk about how they experience things, which is a great tool. But I mean, what you're saying is like how to, it's the art of people. Like you're talking about the art of anesthesia, it's the art of people.
Yes.
And what I'm priming myself to figure out how to do is Enneagram for healthcare providers. Like that's not a thing. There's mindfulness for healthcare providers. There's no book, website, retreat, knowledge, that doesn't exist right now. But I mean, I'm open to forming a community and figuring out how do we purposely integrate this into the art of medicine, period, maybe anesthesia specifically. But yeah, all of us who are conscious and providing healthcare come across personalities in patients and in colleagues. And it's probably the hardest thing we do besides the electronic medical record.
And we don't struggle with that. I feel like your world, that's more of a burden. Our world, I would say it is the people, it is the interactions, it's the operating room setting and that culture. Yeah. So it's such a powerful tool. And as I'm talking to you and I'm thinking of people listening who are like excited right now, or they're interested, or they have that curiosity, of course, I'm going to put the links in the show notes, but when you're looking at a lifelong journey of self-understanding, of maybe diving into the Enneagram, there has to be a first step. Can you just lay out really plainly, like, what should someone's first step be who's listening, and maybe, like how to approach the next few steps?
Well, I think hold very loosely the free test I gave you, but take the free test I gave you. There's 2 tests. One is really quick and easy. One is a little bit more involved. Hold it extremely loosely. Like, just don't even think you're getting a diagnosis. Just do it. And then read about the top 3 in either that website or the other websites I gave you, and see what resonates. And if none of it does, just keep reading. Read about all of them. And see if anything resonates. And then start diving deeper. And in those sites, you can dive deeper. And then I provide interviews. I provide typing interviews. And in the interview, we get underneath things to motivations. So it's not about behaviors, it's about motivations.
Mm-hmm.
And they're really therapeutic in themselves, because people feel like, oh, like I've discovered things about myself just from this interview. It's very prescribed. It's 50 minutes. It doesn't end with a diagnosis, but it ends with 3 top, and then why. And I haven't figured out a venue to actually do that and charge for it professionally.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like you should.
I got my certification in that about, I think, maybe 18 months ago. And to get the certification, I had to do like 100 interviews. So I did a lot of interviews, and maybe it wasn't that many, but it felt like 100.
Yeah.
They were proctored, and there was a lot of interviews. But that's something that is available either. I mean, there's other people who do that, who know who have websites and are doing that professionally. But that's another way when people are really stuck, and it's actually a really nice way if somebody's really getting interested to be heard and seen and explore and have a partner in exploring.
Yeah.
The other thing to warn about, I guess, I don't know if it's a warning or educate. There are lots of teachings out there. Like the Enneagram, people are teaching a lot, and you don't have to be a certified provider to teach. You can just say, I'm teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Like anything else, it can be biased or can be confusing. The IEA, the International Enneagram Institute, has certified providers on it. I'm a certified provider on the IEA. In order to get that, you have to have trained a certain amount. You have to have taught a certain amount. You have to have letters of recommendation. So if people are interested in teachers, looking at the IEA is a place to look. So I don't know, to answer your question, there's lots of ways in.
No, you absolutely did. And I just really want to name that. I think like how you just answered that question is one of the reasons I'm drawn to you, and generally drawn to people who are in a mindfulness space, because there's so much humility in what you claim to know and what you will always say you don't know, and like always coming from this position of a curious learner. I just think anything framed in that reference, I'm so much more drawn to have my own experience and learning than someone who says like, it has to be this way and this is the truth. And like, that's just a huge red flag to me. So I'm really grateful that if my audience is new to the Enneagram, that you are their first voice in learning about the Enneagram. And of course, I'll put all of the links in the show notes. Any opportunity for people to follow up with you? I know you said you don't currently offer the narrative interviews, but maybe put your if you give me your email and people respond to you.
I'm actually collaborating with a group who do have like a platform, and I'm trying to figure out where I fit in that.
Mm-hmm.
And so
interesting.
I'm open to whatever unfolds with this. I mean, that's kind of what's happening for me over the last 4 or 5 years. And the teaching at the medical school has just kind of unfolded. And then this has kind of found its way in really through the students. Like I said, I never even mentioned it. In a mindfulness discussion, I wouldn't have even mentioned it until 2 years ago. And I probably wouldn't have mentioned it with you, Mary Jean, except that I'd kind of been given the permission.
Yeah.
So I am open to co-creating whatever happens. So I will share my email. Like I said, I've got this group I'm kind of collaborating with. Something else we're doing that may be of interest in 2 things, actually. I'm glad you asked because I totally forgot. With this group I'm working with, we're doing a course for parenting in the end of February. It's a 2-day like I think 9 to 4. Lunch is provided. It's a pilot, so it's free, free lunch. And it's about attunement, parenting, and the Enneagram. And that's what we're focusing on. Well, we're specifically focusing on prenatal moms because that's the people I have
Sure.
access to. But it's really open to anybody who can get away for 2 days at the weekend. I mean, we're just thinking people who have little kids probably aren't going to take away from 9 to 4 Saturday and Sunday. But I'll send you the brochure. We are open to anyone in the community. This is, like I said, the pilot, and it's an Enneagram introduction. So there's that. Also, as a prelude to that, I'm teaching 2 kind of introductory courses. One January 23rd and one sometime in February that hasn't been established yet. Where I'm just going to kind of run through the types and talk about the gifts and the places that we're stuck as an introduction for those who are taking the February course, but it's really open to everyone.
Okay.
And the
Yes.
one in January is going to be both virtual and in person. It's going to be hybrid. And the idea is it's a little bit of background for those doing the class in February, but it's also just for anybody.
Amazing. Well, I really appreciate your time, and I'm excited to get this episode out to my community and just have it start creating its ripple in the world. And I will be in touch because you're now on my mentor list. So I'm like, let's check in with Dr. Jackson, see what she's doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it just feels like
Actually, that's a big part of my future calling is to mentor. I mean, that's where I want to be now too. That space is to.
very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, you got me. So thank you so much. And yeah, I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to Awakened Anesthetist. If this episode resonated with you, share it with a CAA friend, an AA student in your life, or a prospective, and let them know why you loved it. It's the most important thing you can do to support this podcast and its mission. You can always find more ways to connect with me and this CAA community at awakenedanesthetist.com, including an invitation to join Season 5 Mindful Connections. These are free virtual gatherings open to anyone in our Awakened Anesthetist community. And while you're scrolling the website, check out my trusted CAA partners who make this podcast possible, with a special thank you to my Season 5 sponsor, Harmony Anesthesia Staffing. Talk soon.